Hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Grace. It is lovely to have you here as always. Today I want to talk about some books that I have very high hopes for and I think could possibly be 5-star books for me. I don't tend to give books star ratings just because it stresses me out too much. I feel like it's too subjective of a system for me and I'll end up rating one book 4 stars when another book that is a completely different level of quality would also be a 4 stars, and it stresses me out. I'm too much of a perfectionist for it. So really, when I say 5-star books, what I mean is just a new all-time favorite book, a book that is going to sit with me for a long time and probably influence who I am in some kind of way. I am very fussy when it comes to these books, and I am also absolutely atrocious at figuring out what is going to be a new favorite for me. A lot of the time it comes down to reading the right book at the right time. So a book that is going to hit me in the place that I am at in that moment. And that is a very difficult thing to predict, unfortunately. Some things that are green flags for me are incredible writing. That is at the top of my list, I think, of if a book is going to work for me. I know that quality writing isn't necessarily everyone's priority, and that's totally fine. Some people prefer a fast-paced plot, something that's going to hook them, they want to focus on the romance. Whatever it is that is really going to connect with you in a book, it's different for everyone. But for me, maybe because I am a writer myself, when I read incredible writing, it hits different. It reminds me of why I want to write myself and just the amazing things that words can do. So that's up there as a factor. I also really like when books are experimental. Maybe they mix genres or formats or break rules in some way. I really enjoy that if it's done well. Genre-wise, I love fantasy. It's probably my favorite genre, but looking at my favorite books, a good chunk of them aren't fantasy books, so clearly it's not a necessity for me to absolutely adore a book. So this is where it starts to get kind of wishy-washy and intangible for me. So really what I'm hoping for here is that one of these books, one of the books on this list, is a new favorite for me. That will be a win. I think when I'm done reading these, I would love to come back and see how I felt about all of these books and if any of them did reach that status of all-time favorite, and then maybe make some new predictions. We'll see how much success I have this time around. Also, just as a note, I've seen a few people do videos like this one, but the most recent one that I saw that kind of inspired me to make a list of my own was made by Erin of Erin Reads. I will link it down below because it's a really great video and you should check out their channel. They are very cool and cozy and have great vibes. But without further ado, let's get into my very hesitant 5-star predictions. So first on my list is a book that I've mentioned on this channel before, and I mentioned at the time that I could not believe I hadn't read this one yet, and I still can't believe that I haven't read this one yet. This is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. I always feel like I'm saying their surname wrong. I'm so sorry. This is the first in a series that has been described to me as lesbian necromancers in space, which immediately sounds right up my alley. But I've also heard just so many good things about this series. A lot of people say it is incredibly funny, that the banter and dialogue between the characters has cracked a lot of people up, and that these books are very weird and confusing, and the writing style changes completely between each book because they're all from the perspective of a different character, I think. All of that sounds incredible to me. I'm very nervous to go into this series because I have such high expectations for it, and at the same time, a lot of people say that you will be confused throughout a lot of your time reading this series because you're meant to be. That's what Tamsyn wants. So I think that this is going to take a reasonable amount of focus and concentration and energy to get through, but I have a feeling it's going to be really worth it. This is just one of those series that seems to have a really strong fan base, and I haven't been part of one of those communities for a piece of media in quite some time. I would really love to get my teeth stuck into a series and just really obsess over some characters in a weird fantasy world. This is also mostly a sci-fi novel. It's sort of sci-fi fantasy crossover from what I've heard, and I don't tend to read much sci-fi, but I would really like to try to read more. And as a fantasy reader, I'm wondering if that crossover might help me to dip my toes into the sci-fi genre a bit more. But like I said, I know a lot of you have read and loved this series, or like me, have it on your TBR. I will get to it soon. I'm just scared. But I have very high hopes for when I do get to it. So that is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. The next book on this list is another one I've had on my TBR for quite some time, but it's really jumped up my list recently because I've heard a lot of people comparing this author's writing to Erin Morgenstern's. Now, I have read both The Night Circus and The Starless Sea, and I didn't love The Night Circus. I thought it was very well written, but I didn't connect to it emotionally very much. But then I read The Starless Sea last year and I connected a lot more to that story, and it was again so gorgeously written and had a lot of those experimental aspects to the writing style that I find so intriguing and inspiring as a writer. But it didn't quite hit 5 stars for me. It was close, but it was more of a 4.5 in the end, I would say, if I was going to rate it. So when I heard this author being compared to Erin Morgenstern, I thought I have to read that soon, and maybe it will manage to hit that spot that Starless Sea didn't quite reach. So that is 10,000 Doors of January by Alix E. Harrow. This is the story of a woman called January who is a ward of a wealthy man living in a sprawling mansion, but one day they come across a strange, mysterious book about secret doors and adventure, and find that they can hop into someone else's story. I really don't know much about this one, which I think is probably the right move, because I think it's going to be quite weird. And I love that, but I want to be surprised by it and the twists and turns that the writing hopefully will take in this one. I've never read anything by Alix E. Harrow. I've heard a lot of good things, and I know that they released Starling House recently, which is another kind of very vibey book about a mansion. But I think this one is a little bit more up my street. I've also heard really good things about Six Deaths of the Saint as well, but that's like a short story, I think. So I'll probably try that one too, but this one I'm hoping is gonna be deliciously odd and take that 5-star spot for me. So that is The 10,000 Doors of January by Alix E. Harrow. The next book that I have cautiously high hopes for is not actually out yet. It comes out later this year, I think in autumn, and it is Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. Lucy is a content creator here on YouTube, and I've been watching her stuff for quite a while. She's talked about books for a long time, and she seems so lovely. And I think she's wanted to write a book for quite some time, and was given a book deal quite recently as she was already writing a manuscript, and that turned into Rewitched. This is a story about a witch called Belle who has kind of lost her magic a little bit. She is pretty burnt out from trying to keep her bookstore afloat and hide her magic from the non-witches around her. But when her 30th birthday arrives, she is summoned by her coven to prove her magic so that she doesn't lose it for good. This sounds so cozy and so up my alley. As someone who has been dealing with burnout for quite some time, I think that I'm gonna feel quite seen by this one, and I could really use a story of someone finding their spark again. It also, I think, has a slow burn romance in it and a lot of great female relationships. It just sounds like it has everything I could want in there. I am a little bit nervous because obviously I've never read anything by Lucy before, so I don't know if I'm gonna jive with her writing style fully, but I have my fingers crossed because this sounds like it could really be perfect for me if it is done well. Also, that cover is so gorgeous and cozy. So that is Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. The next book I have on this list is A Letter to the Luminous Deep by Sylvie Cathrall. This is an underwater love story between a reclusive character who makes a discovery which prompts her to start writing letters to a scholar, and they write passionate letters back and forth and end up solving some kind of mystery in the deep. but soon after, a seaquake hits and both characters disappear. The story is then told through the perspectives of each character's brother and then sister as they piece together these letters and scraps of research and sketches to try and figure out what happened to their siblings. The vibes of this book sound immaculate. I've heard a few people comparing this to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I can totally see the comparison based on the study aspect of this one, and I adored Emily Wilde, so that bodes well. It also has a glowing review on the back from Megan Bannon, who wrote The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy, which I also loved. They call the novel deeply human and mind-bogglingly imaginative, but they say that the lovingly crafted voices of the characters are what kept them hooked. These are all just very big green flags for me. I also haven't read that many underwater books, and I really like that vibe of world building. I think that that will be really fun, as well as solving the mystery through those pieces of mixed media. I think that could make for a really interesting writing style in here. So hopefully this will live up to my expectations. But that is A Letter to the Luminous Deep by Sylvie Cathrall. Now, speaking of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, I adored that book, but again, it didn't quite reach 5-star status for me. Looking back, I think maybe the pacing wasn't quite right in the first book. I had such a fun time and I sped through it, but something just didn't quite give me that 5-star feeling about the first book. However, I have heard from quite a few people now that the sequel, Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands, is even better than the first book. So by any logic, this one has a reasonably good shot at being a 5-star read for me. I absolutely adore Heather Fawcett's writing style. I think it is so whimsical and witty, and I love the relationship between the two main characters in this series. If you don't know, the Emily Wilde books are about a character called Emily Wilde who studies Fae. It's set in kind of an alternate version of our world during the 1800s, I want to say. I'm not certain, don't quote me on that. But a version of our world in which Fae are known to exist, but haven't fully been categorized and understood yet. So Emily is studying them to put together an encyclopedia. She also has a meddlesome academic rival following her around called Wendell Bamblebee, and there may be a bit of a rivals to lovers romance going on. I had such a fun time reading the first book, and I really have high hopes for this one as we continue to get to know these two characters more and their relationship develops. I'm really excited to see more of that. The first book was very cozy, but also kind of dark in places. I don't know if I would call it a cozy fantasy because it did present Fae as those twisty, unpredictable and untrustworthy characters that they are in classic folklore, which I love. That was the thing that I loved the most about The Cruel Prince, was that presentation of Fae, and Heather Fawcett doesn't shy away from this in this series, even though they are largely quite cozy. So I really enjoyed that balance between coziness and a bit of an edge. So yes, I will be getting to this one soon, I promise. It is definitely time. So that is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. And continuing on this theme, I actually have another book by Heather Fawcett on this list, but this is one of their middle grade stories. So this is The Grace of Wild Things. Now, I've actually really struggled to get hold of this one because I don't think it has been published in the UK yet. I'm probably going to have to import one from the US or wait and hope that they publish it over here. But this looks like it was made for me. This is described as a reimagining of Anne of Green Gables, which is one of my favourite books ever, but with witches and magic. On top of that, the main character is even called Grace. When I found out about this book, it had already been out for a while, and I was so shocked that this hadn't been on my radar because it is just so perfectly tuned to my taste. So in this version of Anne of Green Gables, the main character, as I said, is called Grace, and she lives in an orphanage where all the other kids are getting adopted, but not her, and she needs to get away, so she decides to run away and offer to become the apprentice of the witch in the nearby woods. Now, the witch wants nothing to do with her, so she makes a deal that if she can learn all 100 and a half spells from the witch's grimoire, then she will take her her on, but if she fails, the witch will take all of her magic. This just sounds like such a fun, whimsical time, and like I said, I love Heather Fawcett's writing, so I have really high hopes for her writing within a middle grade setting. I need to get my hands on this book because it just sounds so perfect for me. So that is The Grace of Wild Things by Heather Fawcett. The next book on this list is Morgan Is My Name by Sophie Keetch. This is a feminist retelling of the life of Morgan Le Fay, or Morgana, from Arthurian legend. When I got this, I think I thought it was a standalone, but I have since been informed that it is actually a series, and I also just reread the blurb and it literally says right at the start, the opener to a trilogy, so I don't know what I was talking about. I really like and I'm interested in Arthurian legend. I just love the vibes. Wales is one of my favourite places in the world, and a lot of Arthurian legend is set in Wales, or a historical, slightly mythical version of Wales, and just that feeling of being lost in a Welsh wood and add magic to it is scrumptious to me. I also adored the BBC Merlin series growing up, so I definitely want to read more books about Arthurian mythology, and also this gives me strong Circe vibes, which is one of my favourite books, so that combined with the Arthurian legend focus here is really promising. At the same time, it makes me a little bit nervous because I know that it is now very much a trend to do these mythological retellings and make them feminist. I think that they're very hit or miss from my experience and from what I've heard from other readers. And of course this is going to be different because it's not just another Greek mythology retelling, so I'm hoping this will have quite a fresh take. But in terms of my personal special interests, this sounds wonderful. I think there is going to be a lot of cathartic female rage in here. I'm really excited to see this legend from Morgan's perspective, as she is quite a complicated but badass character. So that is Morgan Is My Name by Sophie Keetch. The next book is another one that comes out later this year, but I am so excited for it, and that is A Dark and Drowning Tide by Allison Saft. I have had several Allison Saft books recommended to me, especially A Far Wilder Magic, and it is on my TBR definitely, but this sounds really intriguing. This is the story of Lorelei, a folklorist who is on an expedition, a voyage to discover a magic spring, but the journey gets off to a harrowing start as her beloved mentor is murdered in her quarters of the ship. And the only person that Lorelei knows is innocent is her academic rival, Sylvia, so they have to begrudgingly work together to try to solve this mystery. And as they do, they may have to start confronting their true feelings towards each other. This sounds so good. The vibes just sound impeccable. This is a sapphic rivals to lovers aboard a ship where they're trying to solve a mystery, uncovering secrets, but also there are all of these elements of folklore and mythical creatures. It just sounds like it has everything I could possibly want. And I've heard a lot of good things about Allison Saft's work in the past, so I'm hoping that this will be her best yet. And all of these aspects together will just make for a perfect book for me. Also, both the US and the UK cover are so stunning and just really captivate a vibe that I was hoping for this book when I first heard about it. It feels like it's going to be so atmospheric and I cannot wait. So that is A Dark and Drowning Tide by Allison Saft. The next book on this list is one that I have heard so many incredible things about from so many other booktubers and readers in general, and that is The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. This is the story of a world in which the Moon Throne, an oppressive royal family, has ruled for centuries, having taken their power from the god that they've trapped below their palace. The two main characters of this story, an outcast and a guilt-stricken guard, come together to break this god out of her captivity, and together all of them travel on a 5-day pilgrimage for freedom and an opportunity to take down the Moon Throne forever. I have heard so many interesting things about the way in which this is written. I've heard that the writing is wonderful, but it's not just told in one classical narrative. There is a perspective in here which seems to be watching a play of the events of this story, I think, in our modern setting, and you switch between that and the perspectives of the characters, I think. I don't entirely know because I want to be surprised by the twists and turns that the writing takes in here, but it sounds very experimental and interesting to me. I've also heard that this 5-day countdown that they have in here really sets a pace for the book and means that you just keep reading because you have this time crunch that you're building up towards. I really just haven't heard a bad thing about this one, and it sounds like it's going to be something new that I haven't encountered before, which is what I'm looking for, definitely. So that is The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. The 10th and final book on this list is one that I have never heard anyone talking about, but sounds so intriguing to me, and this is The Moonday Letters by Emmi Itäranta. I stumbled across this while book shopping one day, and it just looks so interesting. I think that this would be described as sci-fi, but it mentions sort of a cross between that and eco-thriller on the blurb. But this is set in the future, a world in which Earth has been ravaged, I assume, by climate change, and we have then gone out to inhabit other planets and explore the solar system and maybe beyond. But this is the story of Sol's wife, Lumi, who is hunting for their partner after they have disappeared. I think that Sol is non-binary from what I can tell from the blurb. So this is the story of Lumi traveling throughout space looking for Sol, and every clue that they encounter uncovering another mystery. It describes them hunting through underground environmental groups and a devastated Earth, as well as the affluent colonies of Mars. And this is all told through letters and extracts. It's an epistolary novel, which I tend to really enjoy. Vibe-wise, it's reminding me of This Is How You Lose the Time War, which I loved so much. I thought it was so beautifully written and like nothing I had ever read before. And this sounds like it could be just as experimental and weird and wacky and wonderful. I've read the first page of this one and the writing is already drawing me in. I'm just going to read you a little bit. It starts undated. Sol, this may be the final page, the one I write after everything has already happened, the one I will tear out at the end of the notebook and place between the cover and the blank title page. The first word on it is your name, the way you will know at once the sentences on the upcoming pages are for you as much as they are for myself. It is the morning after everything. I don't know, it just feels like it's gonna hit for me. There is something about reading in letter format that feels very personal to me, and I feel like I'm really going to get to know Lumi quite well through the way that she writes. I think it's going to be something different, and I'm really excited. And I'm also excited a little bit by the fact that I haven't heard anyone talking about this. There's something about finding a book for yourself without that external influence that I always find exciting. It goes back to that feeling when you're a kid and you're in the library and you stumble across a new book that looks perfect for you. It's like you found your own personal secret little bit of magic. So fingers crossed this will live up to those feelings. But that is The Moonday Letters by Emmi Itäranta. So that is my list for now of books that I hope and pray may become new favourites for me. I have had not the best reading year so far. I've had quite a few books that I have enjoyed. I've had a couple that I really liked and a good few that were kind of okay, but none that have reached that all-time favourite spot for me yet. So I'm hoping that if I manage to squeeze some of these into the rest of the year, they might pay off for me. Thank you so much for watching, as always. I would love to hear if you have read a new 5-star or all-time favourite book so far this year, and if you have by any chance watched multiple of my videos and are getting a sense of my reading taste, I would love to hear if you have any recommendations for me that you think would hit that spot for me, because I'm clearly not very good at picking them for myself, so any advice would be very welcome. But that is all for now. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye bye.